Tuesday afternoon at 4 p.m. in Switzerland, and it's Space Café WebTalk time. Our Space Café WebTalk, 33 minutes with Dr. Marco Ferrazzani, will begin soon. Thank you very much for joining us for our talk today about legal considerations on Europe in space. And I like to extend it and to the moon, but we will cover that later. As always, we appreciate your participation and ongoing feedback. I'm Torsten Kriening, your host today and publisher of SpaceWatch.Global, and we are a Switzerland-based online platform for information in and about space and new space activities in a geopolitical context. I know many of you are already familiar with our website, our bi-weekly and daily newsletters, and the Space Café podcast. Our new episode, number 20, features the wonderful Alexander Suchek on ESA and the legal challenges of space, is it called? And what a coincidence it is. And yes, Alex works with and for our guest today. I also want to highlight the recap of the Space Law Breakfast with Stephen Freeland and his guests from last week. If you haven't been able to attend this session, as it was very Australia friendly, check the video. It's worth spending your time. And if not, please let me know, because we want to improve on what we deliver to you. But also, we keep our fan shop open online for you, where you can support us actively and become a Space Watcher. The edition 1 has cool items for you, your friends, and the ones you love. Your support is needed to keep our work alive, and we do that for you. If you have missed any of our previous web talks, we have an archive available on our website in the event section and on YouTube. We host our Space Café web talks live on a weekly basis, and this is already our 43rd edition today. I'm totally excited to have one very humble but absolute inspiring guest on my show. With that, a very warm welcome, Dr. Marco Ferrazzani. Marco is the legal counsel and head of the Legal Services Department at the European Space Agency, based in its headquarters in Paris. And LinkedIn says Marco is with ESA for 32 years. In this position, he provides a full spectrum of legal advices and guidance on the legal and programmatic aspects of ESA's programs and policies. As ESA's legal counsel, Marco is advisor to the ESA Director General and to the ESA Council for all institutional and legal matters, including the interpretation of the ESA Convention and all relevant legal instruments. He advises ESA organs and its member states on the wide variety of legal matters. And Marco represents ESA at the international conferences and is the head of delegation to the legal subcommittee on UN COPUS. He sits on a number of boards, including those of the European Center for Space Law and the International Institute of Space Law. Marco graduated from the University of Naples Faculty for Law or of Law, where he specialized in and received the University Prize for the best doctoral thesis in international and comparative law. Before joining ESA, he was admitted to legal practice at the bar in Italy and practiced law in the Milan office of one of the leading international commercial law firms in Italy. So, once more, warm welcome, Marco, to the show. And I talked about your vast experience in this detail because you will give us in the next minutes a bit overview where we stand. But let's kick that off. So, Marcos, please help us to get some structure in the EU, ESA, states, legal competencies, and who does what in our European landscape? It's an easy question to start with for you, I think.
Yes, Torsten. Good afternoon to all, and thank you for inviting me today. That's a very good question as a start, and that's a good opening question. That's a good one. First of all, space is very large, as you know. So it's so large that it's too large for only one European actor or one European state. So from the beginning, we Europeans have decided to team up together and work together. And working together means cooperation. So cooperation in Europe means that we have different possibility to work together in Europe for space. And so what we call in jargon the legal competence means who does what, under which basis, it's very clear. Both member states alone with national programs and together intergovernmental basis like ESA or EUMETSAT, and at the European Union level, separate from states, both all these three levels are equally legitimate and authorized and valid to do space policy and space program. So, and this is a fundamental basis that means we have to work together, but then it can be arranged, it can be done with different sorts of arrangements. And I take the words of the last Space Council, European Space Council orientation, both European Union and ESA together, that says literally EU, ESA, and all member states have parallel competence for determining space policy, space needs, for technical independence and European autonomy. That's a phrase, that's a political statement, quite important and true in time and today. So this means that all these three levels are equally lawful and possible. There's not one method that prevails over another one. They are just use one or the other depending on the political choice or the best tool for the moment. So European Space Council gave a very clear orientation and will continue because there will be regular Space Council to come at European level. In practice, it means mutual recognition and respect, pooling space resources together in whichever format or formation is done. I can give you some examples which are quite interesting how we Europeans work in space. We have the so-called European ESA astronauts, which are ESA staff, but of course programs, which are common European programs. We're the European Union that decides about how to use some national assets, for instance, for space surveillance. We have national space laws that determine how to go to space and national regulations that remain and are national ruling over space activities. So there are different levels that play together. Also, we have several actors. Industry that exists through the contract that we give them, service operators in space, they exist through the licensing system, and then of course important end users and customers that see how to use space. And for them, the classical consumer law, the law of service applies to them. So we have different levels of law and different actors in space. This is Europe. It may sound complex from outside observer, but this is Europe. This is how we work in Europe and how we cooperate among Europeans with different formulas.
Okay. I think we all see how difficult Europe is right now in the situation where we are over the last year, but not limited to that. I mean, space has its own rules. Let's talk about ESA and the European space programs next to lead into that. With the recent announcement, so a few weeks back, such as the European Constellation, the Quantum, the security satellites, that came to all our attention. So how does the institutional cooperation and coordination work? And also, further on, can you give us an outlook of the FFPA negotiation as you are part of that without, of course, going too much into detail? I mean, we don't want to put you on the spotlight here.
Yes, sure, no problem. As you said, what is ESA? ESA, as you know, has been the front runner and the open air for European space to be founded, to be done on a research basis and to develop new technologies and constellations. ESA had many years of experience of European space programs and modalities for space management and space operation. But now it's a time of ESA working for the European Union, because ESA and the EU together constitute what we call the European space power, with all the activities, the programs, the tools, and the national assets, and the national industry, and the result. The result is what? Is European space infrastructures. They are in space. We operate in space for the benefit of institutions and citizens, like Galileo, Copernicus, and more to come. You mentioned European telecommunication, QCI. I can mention space traffic management, Earth observation, and many others. As I explained, there is a system of arrangement that comes from the rules, from the Lisbon Treaty, from the various agreements. And we are working with a new financial perspective under a new called space regulation, which is not, it's finalized but not approved yet. It will be approved by the EU Council in May. That's the plan. And by that time, we'll be ready to write what's called the Financial Partnership Agreement, called FFPA. What does it mean? It means that EU funding will be used in the regulation and through the FFPA, covering, first of all, simplifying the various modalities of how you go to space. It's in the regulation. It's valid for the next 7 years, so it gives a perspective, but also covering all possible ways and how to do Galileo, Copernicus, space traffic management, telecommunication, Horizon 20, all these things. So we are now preparing it together with the Commission services. It's actually a daily work of me and my team, quite dense because everything will be in there, has to be described, and many things have to be settled. We're quite advanced. It's not done yet, it has to be ready by May. And there you will see a new structure, a new simplified way how to work, and also to give some clear respective law to ESA as the European Space Agency working for the EU, and also to the EU Space Program Agency, which will be established by the space regulation for certain areas which are specific. It's a specific so-called delegation mandate and task that the EU Space Program Agency in Prague will receive. So it's going to be a new arrangement for the next 7 years, which will give stability to programs. And also management.
Can you repeat the last sentence? Because at least I lost you. So I hope that's not on my end, or that all the others could hear you, but just for me.
No, sorry, it might be the link here. It's weak. I said this new financial partnership for 7 years will give a new arrangement and distribution of tasks around the European Union, which is both for European Union Space Program Agency, EUSPA, in Prague, and for ESA working for the EU. When I mention Europe, it means cooperation, means working together. ESA will clearly work for the European Union, will retain his identity, but work for the EU. Commissioner Thierry Breton was very clear in January in his speech, said we need ESA, the ESA today, we need ESA to work for the European Union. Of course, under the conditions which will be set in the space regulation to be approved by the EU Council. And that's what's, then the space regulation applies to the EU, then has to be accepted by ESA, and ESA will accept it through writing the financial partnership, which will happen at the same time. So we're working on that.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, how many lawyers do you have in your team to work on such, I think, massive agreements? I mean, that's not easy. That's not a usual regulation, or I mean, it's very complex and massive, or to get all the stakeholders under one umbrella. So, how big is the team you're working with?
No, my team, the legal department of ESA, is 20 lawyers, but they do very many different things, of course, from national law to international space law to programmatic decisions and export control, intellectual property rights, all different areas. As for the EU, of course, the regulation has been written and prepared by colleagues in the Commission, but we work on the FFPA. It's only about 3 or 4 of us working on that intensively, I have to say. discussing with the Commission and USPA colleagues. It's quite dense work, but we're used to that. We've done already several agreements. They used to be called budget delegation agreements from the Commission to ESA. We've done several, so we have experience on that. It's always quite legal intensive work.
And I'm quite sure there are abbreviations for all of these massive paperworks. Let's move on and take that into more a practical aspect. There are many talks about an even more competitive European space industry, satellites, launcher, technology in general. And how does now law and regulation sustain our innovation and foster competition? Not to say not hindering it. So, I mean, what can law do for fostering space industry in Europe?
Law can do a lot, is already doing a lot. I'll give you some examples.
Yes, please.
First of all, space is growing and the space economy is growing. We all know this. If you look back at 2020, it's been a very hard year for many of us because of the health conditions. But if you look at space, 2020 has been a record year. We have had over 100 launches from Earth to space, and more than 1,000 satellites in orbit, put in orbit last year. It's a record year. It is growing.
Yeah, but how many of them are Europeans?
I'm saying that space economy is growing, and we want Europe to have its share. Yeah. And this is another of the space policy orientation, where it is clearly noted by the authorities that out of this general growing space economy, Europe has to take its share and contribute, because we have very good technical capacity, expertise, colleagues, industry, technology, and the idea now is to come to fruition. If you just know that the amount of space economy, global space economy, upstream and what we call downstream together, they exceed the amount of public spending, also in Europe. Mm-hmm. And this is driven by technical innovation and by economic push and opportunities. The idea now is to Europe to take that share with more structural space program, but also with a stimulus to industry. You know, it's always been the mandate of ESA to put industry in a situation of international competitiveness, and this can be done through law. My argument, and law should be used as a tool. And I'll give you another point. We speak of economic success, like new operators, newcomers. For me, economic success is when there is a viable long-term case which is mm-hmm. sustainable on itself. And this has been done in areas of space like telecommunication system, weather forecasting, Earth observation, public service. Whether public service or private, these are viable and sustainable. And the idea is that we can progress in space application also thanks and through law, because the laws are those who permit this system to mature and to become viable to the market. I gave you an example of legislative evolution, which was instrumental. In 2010, the US Congress passed a bipartisan bill about space commercialization by allowing NASA, actually instructing NASA, no longer to develop its own system, just buy them, but buy off-the-shelf, the famous COTS contracts, buy off-the-shelf technology and buy a service. There was a move there from federal acquisition procurement into buying a service. And these create the things, small things like SpaceX services and many other Boeing and other kind of business in space in low Earth orbit. There, it was a legislative action. The law determined a shift, of course, with abundant public federal budget, of course. So the law, together with public resources, can make a difference. And this has happened in the last 10 years in the US. So what my argument is, law is an ingredient. It's an enabling ingredient. Of course, as you know, law is also used to balance interests of the sides of the party, the public and the private. But for me, more in Europe, more space and more space operation will need more adapted laws, more tailored, actually more precise, but also more predictive to what we expect space should be. So it's a balancing act to do the right laws, the wise law were written, not too prescriptive, but more enabling than prescriptive, and what I call adaptive, in the sense they have to be not describing everything. It's not a full law that has to describe all the details, but be progressive. What's called, I discovered a word called incremental innovation. These engineers invent this word. Incremental innovation means you don't write everything. You allow different waves of innovation to mature, and then the law has to be the same. We can have laws that are actually done. Of course, it takes years, but then can be adapted in a flexible system progressively with the waves of innovation. I take an example, which some of my colleagues will like. We have an experience in space operations already about a worldwide regime that has been incremental and adaptive. And that's the ITU system of convention and arrangement, where we don't need from after the convention, you don't need to go back to national governments and actually national parliaments ratification. You have a system where a meeting every 4 years, or what's called plenipotentiaries, can update the convention, actually adjust some parts, adaptive, with new generation of technology coming up for telecommunication and standards and new services. And that's a very clever system that the world has already experienced over the last decades. It's a very interesting system where there is a good, solid long-term framework, but there's also an adaptive mechanism of flexibility where some parts are only set up and agreed when the technology matures and where there is a need. We have to go into that state of mind with what I call national space law and legislation to be more in that kind of flexibility and incremental innovation. And you know that ESA, we advise national legislators in new laws, especially in our member states. That's part of our work in the legal department. We do it. And we learned a lot from that. And I think we will see in the years to come national laws, either new one or laws already done, adapted and changing over time. It should be normal, shouldn't be a dramatic at all. And if I see at national space law, we saw a lot of those coming up in the last 20 years or so all over the world. Well, I would expect to see them change in a way, adapt in the next 20 years because technology will mature, will adapt. So we have to get used to that in a way. And also get used to the fact that law is not only written, but it's also applied.
Not sure if you...
In the sense that first come to operations, come to cases with case law. Case law means the parties litigate and then they go to court for settlement. This was not happening much in the past. It will happen. So we'll need space courts, space judges. There's already a permanent arbitration system in The Hague. I had news about the Dubai setting up a so-called space court open to anyone around the world who wants to go there. You can choose the law and go to the Dubai Space Court. It's a new announcement. I can give you an example. In International Institute of Space Law, we do something magnificent called the Space Law Martial Arts Moot Court, where we train with moot cases and we simulate a case where there's a space event and litigation among the parties. That's a very good training ground that I actually encourage all of you. As students, as coach of team, even as professional, you can be a judge. We in ECSL organize the European regional round for that. It's a very good experience because it will come soon. That we'll have several laws, several cases, and lawyers will be needed to call for work for that. So it's an exciting perspective.
Absolutely. And thank you that you mentioned these Dubai announcement. We picked it up today as well and try to find out more. I mean, you might have seen that I had Abdallah Al-Wasl, or not Abdallah, Mahmoud Al-Wasl on my show a few weeks back, and from the Hague Institute of Global Justice with their new space initiatives that goes exactly that same way. So I think, as you mentioned, The Hague has a heritage of an international arbitration platform. I mean, it's interesting to see what comes out, and thanks for mentioning also the moot court competitions. We have a number of questions which I would like to go into in a bit. So my last topic I would like to touch on here is exploration. And we had a great announcement by Airbus on the Orion earlier today, and maybe you can elaborate a bit more on that. But European exploration projects, question mark. So how does ESA and NASA team up or on their way forward to the moon and are sustained by law and international commitments? Maybe you can show us a way into that and how commercial companies play into that. We get here also a number of questions that going into this direction, but we will come to them in a minute. But just maybe your overall view on the exploration topic from Europe.
It's an exciting topic, and we're working on that, and it was part of our work also last year. You know, ESA and NASA have a long tradition of cooperation in many missions, also science mission or International Space Station. And thanks to that, ESA has been designated as the European partner representative, as a European agency for ESA member states for the International Space Station. We had agreements in 1988 and 1998, two MOUs with NASA, and that's how we built International Space Station. Well, now we are doing, last October, we signed the same thing for the Lunar Gateway. So that ESA has been designated as the European voice, the European partner, for building the European contribution to Lunar Gateway, which will be around the moon. Signing an agreement we signed in October, and that agreement is a landmark agreement for the European contribution to going forward to the moon. It's the first agreement that sets how Europe will cooperate with NASA and then with other partners, the arrangement with the Japanese and Canadian. That's already signed, and we're working on that. And through that, we deliver habitation module, the crew, the European ESA astronauts, and of course, the module, Orion. 3 of them are already built. They are built on ESA contract in Germany. And 3 more, as announced today, is the contract we signed today for 3 more to launch. Number 1 will be the first Orion going to the mission this year, which is unmanned testing. Number 2 will be the first manned in 22. That will go around the moon and come back. And module number 3 will be 24 going on the moon. So you see, 3 Europe built the service module of the Orion, and the Orion accommodates a crew of 4, are already instrumental, actually what's called in jargon, on the critical path, which means essential for NASA to go to the moon. So it's the first time ever in history that partner is ESA through the contracts that we place in Europe. And this is in the agreement we signed in October.
Can you repeat this, please? Because we lost you or the last sentence. Is it possible?
Sorry. I said it's the first time in history that NASA relies on a non-US partner, this is ESA, and our contractors in Europe, on a critical path to a main space objective of the US. And this will be the Orion and the habitation model on the Lunar Gateway with European crew and so on. This has at least the same meaning of the agreements we did in the 90s for Space Station. And this will open up a whole perspective for ESA, but also for member states and for operators. Private operators and industry from Europe, from ESA, will be able to work on the Lunar Gateway and also on the surface operation with new agreements to make, of course. So we have to complete the legal and operational framework with new agreements. And we're already thinking about providing lunar telecommunication services, for instance, by private companies. Allowing, if you want to go to the moon, Torsten mission to the moon, you will be able to rely on the ESA gateway, but also on telecommunication company that allow your company, your initiative, to go to the moon. It will be sold as a service. And that's one of the things I was saying before. What used to be procured by public side is now becoming a sort of public commodity and procured as a service available both to the space agencies, who will be the infrastructure, of course, also the base on the moon, but also available to private users if you want to purchase a service. On the moon, it will be mainly, exploration will be mainly continued by big space agency like ESA, NASA, JAXA, CSA, and also the Russian and Chinese. The infrastructure will continue to be. Also, the resources will mainly initially be for the space agency to build the bases. But then this will allow and open the way to many other operators that can use the public infrastructure. As I mentioned before, space infrastructure is very heavy and expensive, and then operator can use it and then develop their own business in addition.
Just on that to clarify, ESA signed with ESA on the gateway, not on Artemis yet, or did it include Artemis as well?
I have to make a clear distinction, as otherwise there's confusion. Lunar Gateway is an agreement between ESA, NASA, the Japanese Space Agency, JAXA, and the Korean Space Agency for the structural gateway. Yeah. Artemis is the US program for going to the moon and the surface and operations. And that's the Artemis program of NASA, which in practice we cooperate with through the gateway. Okay. Then there's another thing called the Artemis Accords, which is not the gateway. It's the Artemis Accords. It's a text, as you may have read them, is a series of principles that clarify, even expand the principles, the legal principle of the Outer Space Treaty. But these are political statements with like-minded nations, and these are nations that specify a series of principles or even introduce additional principles like protection of heritage or operations, which NASA is proposing for those who want to join and apply them when there will be missions on the surface of the moon. Got it. So they are not directly applicable to the gateway as such. It would be for operations on the surface of the moon, which will come. So there will be, of course, new developments, new agreements. And here again, law is the tool to enable missions, both from agency and from private operators in or around the Artemis program.
Got it. Okay, thanks for clarification on that. I mean, the gateway, I think, as we all know, is heavily depending on the SLS or as a carrier, as a rocket, and I think it will come with that. And I think we in Europe cross our fingers that we will see that one day. And even there's an ambitious timeline right now and a new administration, but we hope for the best. Let's use some minutes for taking a few of the questions, and thank you very much for all your questions and your comments you sent in. Antonino asked, in your opinion, why there have been no SpaceX or similar innovative or space startup from Europe so far? Any short answer from your end?
The short answer is that there are many. They are contained in the Space Economy Report from ESA and from SP. You can see that there are many startups. Maybe they're not known, they're too small, they're still not come up, but there are many. There are not as many as you can find maybe in the US or other parts of the world, but you have to relate to the size of the public investment. Startups and new companies come often as a consequence of public funding. And I remind all that European public funding in space is at least 6 to 10 times smaller than the US public funding in space.
Okay.
So we just have to invest more and there will be more results.
Yes, that's a good call for our politicians. I think they're in charge of it.
That's what ESA does all the time. We try to persuade politicians with new programs, new initiatives, even new modalities of doing the same thing. And we have a new director general in ESA coming up in a few weeks. And I'm sure, and he already has announced, he has ideas to propose starting early already in March, what he calls Agenda 25, with many new innovative ideas. We are working for Joseph on this.
Looking forward to that. Another question, and I think that's very interesting, one is, can geo-return rules and innovation go together?
Absolutely, yes. It's the formula of ESA. That's what we practice since 50 years. And G-return is only one of the criteria of the ESA industrial policy. The criteria number one of ESA is innovation. Criteria number two is open competition. All ESA invitations to tender are open and competitive, but in the end, we also, as one of the criteria, we have to give a financial return to the investors in ESA, which are the member states' public funding. As much as you do in a private company, you owe a return to the investor, which are the shareholders. In ESA, the shareholder are the member state public funding. So it's the same concept, not different. And it's more than legitimate that public funding, member states and governments want to see a return on their investment into European programs. Okay. So I don't see, then it's a matter of balancing and finding out. But the first thing ESA does is to do innovation, do innovative new programs and make them work in space, not just for G-return.
We got another one from Robert Bente, but I think that was answered 2 weeks back by Elodie. Maybe you can add some thoughts on that. Is ESA involved in the thoughts the European Commission has communicated in terms of starting the third major space program, the LEO constellation? And if so, shall a potential legal framework oriented at the current space regulation and the corresponding FFPA? I mean, Elodie answered
that. I saw. And I can just repeat, yes, ESA is very much involved. And we didn't say more than ESA was already at the origin of this idea, already back in the years. We did several studies, and Elodie can explain it well. ESA did several studies. We are not just pleased every time there is a result of a ESA preparatory work that becomes an European Union interest and program. It's just the success of an earlier ESA study. That's great. Now there's a study how to shape it really, formally speaking, in the EU funding context in the next 7 years. The commissioner is proposing that. We are absolutely excited and participating to that, and to allow ESA management skills and ESA structure of offering invitation to tender and contracts to put at the service of the EU objectives. So there's a system. ESA participates fully into that. We don't know yet if it will be part of the FFPA or beyond. It's a matter of how the Commission shapes its own financial flow, its funding. Because EU funding has different flow. One is so-called space regulation funding. Others, then there are other resources like Horizon Europe, EU Recovery Fund, all these funds that are coming up. These are all, we don't have to see them as strategic. On the contrary, they are opportunities to find innovation. And we're already working for the FFPA, even beyond the FFPA. There are several other possibilities.
Okay, great. I think we leave it here as we are approaching our 33 minutes. So thank you very much, Marco, for these interesting talks. And I'm afraid that now with our strict rules of the 33 minutes, we have to come to an end. Even I really enjoyed the conversation with you. Rest assured, we will continue following space law topics you raised in our future Space Café web talks and in this own series. And for those that like to talk more about the topic, we will start a Clubhouse launch in a few minutes. Just search for Space Café at 4:45 CET today, and let's experiment with this new platform. Next week, our next Space Café is next week. We will see Elena Morozova as our guest. And Elena, great to see you in the audience, the new executive director of Intersputnik. And that's a talk you shouldn't miss as well, like all the others, of course, but just especially. One day later, on the 10th, we will launch the Space Café Brazil by Ian Grossner in Brasilia, and that will be in Portuguese. And his guest will be Olavo Bittencourt, another great space lawyer we have. On the 11th, one day later, next Thursday, Moriba Jah will host his next Moriba's Vox Populi, talking with his guests about space and religions. And it's also fascinating our topic. On the 16th, my guest will be Dr. Jessica West from the project PlugShares. And on the 23rd, my guest will be Nikolai Kislov. I will train his surname, from the World Economics Forum. And all events are online As usual, as always, we would like to hear your feedback, so please check in with us on Twitter, on Facebook, or LinkedIn. Don't forget to sign up to our daily and our bi-weekly newsletters, and if you like to treat yourself with something special, become a Space Watcher today. Your support will help us. Take your credit card and visit our fan shop at shop.SpaceWatch.Global, and I know I repeat myself, we need your support to continue our work. Thank you all very much for your interest today, and Marco, you filled up our house today completely. I mean, I think a number of people had to stay outside or couldn't go in. So we reached over 100 people in the audience, and that shows also the limit on the current license we have. So you are a great guest. And
thank you. Go for new space technology and include more and more. We have to be inclusive. Thank you for that. Thank you for inviting me today.
It was a very inspiring talk, and thanks again to the entire team behind the scenes for doing their great job week by week again. And I hope you all will stay safe and stay healthy. And thanks for joining us again. And I hope to see you next week. In the meantime, visit our website and follow us on social media. Don't forget, become a Space Watcher. Thank you very much. Marco, ciao. It was a great pleasure to have you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao.